Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Rudi Van Dael. I work for the Asian Development Bank in Nepal since 2019. This is on personal title, I have to say this. My background, and we'll go to the, is that I used to write a PhD where I studied computing scientists as a tribe. So I did a sociology of professions. You are interesting people. Secondly, for 5 years I worked for a Dutch company that did quality assurance on large government IT systems in the Netherlands. So I draw on this. I will look at, and today this really suits to what Em said, how service delivery, when we use technology, how that affects decision making, and how power shifts when you talk about public service delivery. It's a bit of an intellectual jump, so let's see how far we get. 4 topics, a little bit about Nepal, then about government service delivery, then the focus of this one, and especially for the students here, on your responsibility when you make design choices. And then we end up that in public sector, decision making is far more complex than in private sector. So how can we make implementable systems? I'm preaching for believers here. Nepal is making a slow transformation, but the real structural transformation of changing your economy is still to happen. Please realize we still have 62% of Nepali households fully engaged in agriculture, and 69% of them do not sell a single product. Please also realize that 25% of those farmers only sell very few products. Slowly we are getting less poor, and slowly we're getting up in the Human Development Index. If you look at a longer term scale, of course, it's getting better, but we want radical change. We want to become middle income quicker. So what is the plan? 4 pillars, I would say, and ADB helps with that. Number 1, how can we get a quality business climate? How can we make a business climate that attracts foreign investors, where people feel comfortable to do business, to expand? Connectivity, of course. Everybody who tries to get a product from Kathmandu to Lumbini knows how tough it is. Electricity, communications, but also ease of doing business. And of course, and I think this morning, Alice from UNICEF, of course, would have talked about that, equitable service delivery. How can we get health, education, social protection, and urban services to all so people have a decent life? Unfortunately, climate change is a reality. I realize that even the chairman of the COP is not fully convinced of that, but I am. We need to do everything climate resilience. What can information technology do? I'm a bit longer in the field than I am, since the early 90s, so we changed words. But I would say information communication technology is still relevant. Number 1, strengthen service delivery. We can really, as Nepal, implement our services better. Nepal has more than 80 social protection programs to help the poor. None of them are connected. All of them have separate systems and separate definitions. Those of you who have tried to get 1 or 2 subsidies might realize. We talk about single window portals. And I know this, for some people this sounds like 90s and early 2000s talk, but for Nepal it's still very difficult to go to one portal and ask for a permit. It can help in improving transparency. Paper is patient, but ERP systems are merciless. You cannot antedate, you can really follow. And in many countries it's proven that if you can follow how a government office is providing your services, it automatically goes quicker. And of course, it can strengthen economic development. Usually we talk about 2 areas. One is improve a business environment, ease of doing business. Em really talked about that. How can we get banks to coordinate? Nepal is moving. When I joined here, it took 3 days to get a bank transfer from Standard Chartered to Nabil Bank. Since the last 3 months, it can go in 1 day. Not yet in 1 second, like in the Netherlands, but at least in 1 day. And of course, ICT in itself is a large business. The latest assessment says that about 100,000 people in Nepal work in ICT. Unfortunately, most of them for foreign companies, but that has to do with number one. So what are we talking about? This is very important. When we talk about service delivery, pre-large-scale technology, and your country is still a little bit there, you have a general policy, but then what we call the street-level bureaucrat, the person you go to ask for the service, he or she is the real decision maker. Because the policy is general, and that individual interprets the policy. We did 2 studies during COVID. Government of Nepal provided free food for poor people. Who decides who's poor? The ward chair. Not a system, the ward chair. The government gave concessional lending to businesses, eligible businesses. Nice document. Who decides who's eligible? The bank where you go to. That's what we call street-level bureaucrats. And pre-technology, pre-large-scale technology, they are the real decision makers. In my country, that has totally changed. If I now go to a government office, usually there's nobody, because I go online and I fill into a system. And the system makes the decision. So what the system does, what we call the policy technology system, made by system-level bureaucrats, and many of you, even though you might not like a bureaucrat, will become one, and I hope you do, because you can help a lot of people. They make individual decisions. They mix the policy into an algorithm, into a system. In my country, when I want to get a scholarship for my daughter, I don't see anybody. Via the tax system, my income is calculated. There's an algorithm that says, Rudi, you're too rich, your daughter doesn't get anything. My younger brother got unemployed, his daughter gets something. We don't talk with anybody. We don't even fill in a form. If you want to teach for a school, you need to get a declaration of good behavior. Click. You talk with nobody. But that also means that the decision is no longer made by the person you now go to in Nepal, but by the people who design the system. So your design choices are extremely important. And those design choices are not only technology. That's why we use the word, and I did not meet every section this morning, we talk about information architecture. And for that you have to make decisions at 5 different levels. When you, as a system-level bureaucrat with policymakers all together decide that. The legal basis, the organizational level, the information level, the application level, and the networking level. When we talk about ICT, we very often only talk about number 5. Number 3, for example, is extremely important. I did a study in the Netherlands for the Central Bureau of Statistics. It turns out we had more than 15 definitions of profit. The job of Central Bureau of Statistics was to gather the profit from companies. All those definitions from profit were legal. So it was not that they were cooking the books, pre-taxes, after taxes, whatever. So organizational level, who's going to do what? And the legal basis, how do you define who's eligible or not? But then still, if you say a poor person is eligible, what is poverty? How to measure? How to assess? All of that needs to be there. All of that you make the decisions. And technology is an integral part of that. So when you are a system-level person and you're thinking of how to improve service delivery with technology system, there's a big difference in the street-level time. You don't see your beneficiaries. You are a person sitting in a group, in a workshop, in a conference like this, and you're designing a system on how to help handicapped people. Very often, you sit with people like you. 4 or 5 computer graduates, a policy person, a cup of coffee, and you start thinking. And what your tendency is, when you make decisions, when you defend them, is that you call them technological decisions. We just talked about technological progress, as if it's something outside humans, as if something we don't have influence in. Yeah, that's the technology, it's the progress. That's a strategy. Because if you do that, you say, oh, it's neutral. I don't make any political or ethical decisions. Street level, system level bureaucrats are masters in that. Because if you call something a technical decision, politicians will say, oh, it's difficult, it won't affect me. But it does. Because every design choice you make is political, economically, legal, and technical. And if you make a system like this, it has huge consequences for a large number of people. Okay, I'll skip this one. What are design choices that you have to fix? How do you enter and change information? Can I do it as a beneficiary? And what happens if I die? Only the civil servant, but who will check him or her? Which documents are you going to use? Whom are you going to trust? What are you going to do with exceptions? Nobody wants to be an exception in a system. You all worked with these beautiful AI-driven automatic answering machines. If you come to choice number 9 and it says, do you want to talk to a real person? Then you are an exception. You don't want to be that. So how do you design them? You assume connectivity. But what if there's no connectivity? If you want to use data from other systems, how do you trust those systems? And do they use the same definition? Let me give an example for Nepal. If you design a social protection program, do you make it for residents or do you make it for citizens? It's a huge decision. If you make it for citizens, it's easy. You can use the ID card, but it's not there. So what should you do? Number 1, get people from different backgrounds to talk with you and spend time. All of us know that 2 days at the start of a system design can save 2 years halfway. Please realize that one size does not fit all. And also realize that what might work when you sit in your small room and have one computer will not work when it applies to 25 million people. Remember, there's legacy, big legacy. So take those existing practices seriously. Don't just think, I know computing scientists love to do tabula rasa. Oh, we just make a new system. You know, we'll work, we'll solve all the problems. But they forgot that there's existing systems. And here, and I'm not getting a lot of fans with this statement, but one of my favorite professors always says, when you talk about public service delivery, be very nervous when people say all the noses are in the same direction. Let's get on the same page. What if that's the wrong page? What if that's the wrong decisions? I like it when people are disagreeing. I like it when we make incremental changes and do one small step. There's no silver bullet. If it would exist, we would have already used it, and most likely would have realized it was not that silver after all, halfway. So please, be humble when you make systems for your fellow citizens. Thank you very much for listening.